Hello and welcome everybody to the GL Tips for Dynamics CP webinar. My name is Brandon Cook and I'm going to be doing a super quick intro for Windi here before we get to our demo part. So as you guys see, we are using GoToWebinar today. If you look on the right side of the screen, you'll see the questions tab. If you have a question as we go, you can throw it in that tab there. We're also doing a Q&A at the very end of the webinar, so all the questions that will be in the queue will be answered at the very end. Also, just as a quick note, this is being recorded, so you can go to Njevity.com and go to our resources page and check out all of our recent webinar recordings and see some of our upcoming stuff as well. So we have a pretty short agenda for today. It's going to be closer to a 30-minute webinar. We're going to be doing our mission statement and intro, the quick demo, and we'll get to the Q&A section. So I'll go ahead and do our Njevity mission statement. Our mission statement is really important to us and is at the foundation of everything we do here at Njevity. So our mission is to improve the life and success of our partners and customers by providing exceptional business application experiences that simplify and delight. And our presenter today is Windi Epperson, of course. I know a lot of you guys probably know Windi. She's our support manager here at Njevity. She's joined us last summer, and I'm sure a lot of you guys have had the opportunity to talk with her before. So go ahead and turn it over to Windi now.
Good morning. Today we are, as Brandon mentioned, doing about 30 minutes of my favorite tips and tricks around the general ledger. This is the short list of what we're going to cover. And then at the end, we'll have a little Q&A. I timed myself out today and took almost 30 minutes talking, so I'm going to go ahead and jump right in. Okay, the first item on my list is batches and clearing recurring amounts. So if we hop down here to financial and we look at batches, this feature came out a couple of versions ago, but I think folks miss this often, which is why I wanted to bring it to everyone's attention and explain to you where it could be very beneficial. So down here in my monthly batch, recurring batch, I have this checkbox to clear recurring amounts. So the benefit of this is if I have a payroll batch or maybe a fixed asset batch that I enter every month, and especially for payroll could be a 20 or 30 account journal entry, but every month the dollar amounts are going to change. If I check this box, then when I post that batch, it will keep the template for the journal entry, keep all the account numbers, and it'll move the date forward, but it'll clear out the amount so that I can go in and just key the amounts in fresh each month so that I don't hold a journal entry out there that has incorrect numbers in it. So this can be even more applicable, unfortunately, in our COVID world today, where payroll, if we've got a recurring payroll entry, the payroll that we have coming up for the end of April may not be anywhere close to the payroll that we had for the end of March. So having those numbers cleared out, if you have FRX or management reporters set up to run provisional reporting, then provisional reporting will pull in posted and unposted transactions, meaning if I'm running provisional, I'm looking at those unposted journal entries. So if my end of March payroll batch was $40,000, but I expect my end of April payroll batch to be $20,000, if I'm running reports for the end of April and I haven't cleared out those amounts in my batch, then my statements are going to look like they're way off for April. The other thing that I've seen there is I had a customer once who had a recurring auto allowance payment, but they didn't pay it every month. And it was throwing their financial statements off by having that journal entry out there in an unposted status with dollar amounts in it. So I just wanted to let you know there's a couple of really good benefits for clearing those out. Then your journal entry becomes more of a template as opposed to recurring dollar amounts. Okay. The next piece that we're going to look at is standard functionality in GP. It's been here for several versions, but we're going to look at the options to correct copy and paste, which is the copy paste from Excel functionality. We're going to start with copy, and sorry, but I didn't undo my demo from this morning, so I got my brain sidetracked on what I was going to say. We're going to start with copy, and copy does exactly what it sounds like it's going to do. If I put in a journal entry and tab through journal entry already exists. If I pull up an existing journal entry and click OK, it's just going to copy that. It's going to bring back in the same date, the exact journal entry that it had before. It's going to leave the reference open and I can change whatever I want to. Now, one thing that you might notice is when you go into this copy button, if you pick a journal entry that comes from a subledger, in your world, it probably says, hey, this came from a subledger and you can't reverse it. Mine says this transaction was entered in sales order processing and will not be updated. Do you want, and sales order will not be updated. Do you want to continue? So mine is letting me know, hey, you're getting ready to do something that's going to make your subledger be out of balance with your general ledger. Let me toggle a switch really quickly to show you this. There is a feature in GP, no, please clear that, close that. Down here in the setup window, under general ledger, this little button, void correcting and subsidiary transactions, if that is turned off, then you will get a completely different message in that journal entry window. So let's go over and take a look at the other message. Copy, let's pick up the sales one. And what it tells me is you can't do this. This transaction was entered in the sales order processing and cannot be corrected in general ledger. So it's saying, hey, you can't do this. It's going to cause an out of balance and this is going to be a problem. If I turn that option back on in my setup window, then my message changes and says, hey, you really shouldn't do this because you're going to cause an out of balance, but you can do it. So this checkbox in here is really a checkbox that should be checked as needed. So I call this, an exception checkbox. If I really have something that got messed up in my subledger and I need to fix it in my general ledger without going through all the process of voiding invoices or refunding payments or whatever it's going to take to fix it in the subledger, then I can turn this on. But I want to make sure that if I turn it on, I turn it back off when I'm finished with it. So if I do that and then I go ahead and choose to copy one of my subledger journal entries, and it tells me, hey, this isn't GAAP. Are you sure you want to do this? Yes, I really do want to do this. I'm going to go ahead and copy that in. It's going to bring in that whole entry. And then in my opinion, what you should do is really put a good reference in here and potentially attach some documentation to show why we made this journal entry not in the subledger, but in the general ledger instead. So that's the copy functionality. Now, you also have this correct functionality. And I call this button my 10:30 Friday night button, because every time I'm trying to do accounting at 10:30 on Friday night, I book my entry backwards at least once, probably more like 2 or 3 times. So this button is going to let me do a back out journal entry or a back out and create a correcting journal entry. I'm going to go ahead and do the second one for our demo because back out journal entry works just the same with either option. But if I add the correct creating entry, it takes me one step further. So I'm going to go ahead and grab that. We'll see if it likes my 3556 journal entry for this one, and it doesn't because I've done too many things with that journal entry. So let's go find another one. Let's try this one. Okay, so because I chose back out and create a correcting entry, when I click OK, the first thing it's going to do is it's going to back out the original entry. And you'll see it brought in the original transaction date, and it's saying back out journal entry 3532, and it's showing flipped from what had originally happened. You can, at this point in time, post that or save it in a batch. I'm going to save it in a batch so you can see the next step. And then it puts it back as it was originally created with correcting reference here. And this is where I can change a date, change dollar amounts, change distributions, etc. And then save it in to fix or attach documentation to support it and fix that. I'm going to go sidetrack Rogue for just a second here. Another thing that you can see in here, this is a new feature that was added a couple of versions ago, but it's a user preference memory feature. So if I go into a journal entry and I expand that, then I've got places down here where I can say this was for my GPUG trip or whatever that information is. I've got this additional description. I'm going to go ahead and save this journal entry. With the latest versions of GP, it will remember on a user by user basis your preference. So if I close out this journal entry and bring it back up, it's going to bring it up automatically in expanded version. If I consolidate this down and save my journal entry, close it, bring it back up, it's going to open this up in consolidated fashion. So it remembers in your distribution windows whether you want to see, and it remembers by distribution windows. So when I'm doing journal entries, I may always want it expanded because I may always be entering information. And in an AP distribution, I may not want it expanded, or vice versa. I may want it expanded in AP to add additional information, but I don't care about the additional information in the journal entry. But it does remember who you are and what you did. So that's a little extra bonus that wasn't on my list. Okay. Lastly, we have the copy and paste from Excel functionality. Now, the copy and paste from Excel functionality does not work in the GP web client at all. Actually, I shouldn't say that. Did not work in the GP web client until the most recent version of GP was released, which was the version released back in October, which is version 18.2.1036. With the Power GP Online functionality, because our Power GP Online is structured largely around the web client functionality, then we don't have the copy and paste functionality, but it will be coming out in the next couple of months. So if you are on a Power GP version, you won't be able to copy and paste from Excel at this point in time, but you will be in a couple of extra months. From this window, just to show you this, help and about is always quite helpful in GP if you're not using help. Let me drag this screen up here. But here's the copy journal entries from Excel window, and it tells you the layout. Description, account, debit, credit, extremely simplistic, just what I have here. If you put headers in there, you do not want to copy the headers. So when we get ready to demo this in a minute, I'll show you. And also, if you're using analytical accounting, you can add that as a fifth column. So the help is right there. If you'd ever forget what the template looks like, it's right there in the help window. Let's go ahead and throw in a description, account, debit, credit. Okay, so we've got this all ready. I'm going to copy this. I'm going to pop over here. And I highly recommend if you're going to use the copy and paste, you put your cursor in the reference field. I have seen issues where people copy and pasted journal entries and they were down here in the body, and it sees this as a blank line and can mess things up. So I always just go up here to make sure that I know I'm in a nice clean place. I'm not in the lines. And when I control V, it's not doing anything because it doesn't like the headers. So what I need to do is I need to grab just the data, Control C, and actually I should have did paste instead. So, and then I click paste and it just sucks it right in. So easy peasy. I can come in here and add distribution references. I can add a reference, and then I've got that journal entry all nice and happy. Except I didn't put anything in that required field. All right. No. Let's see what's next on my list. Budget transactions. Okay. The reason I wanted to put budget transactions are because this again has been around for a couple of versions, but I think people miss this functionality. So from an ex-auditor standpoint, which I was, if I have a budget and I've sent my budget off to my department heads, and my department heads have all sent me back an Excel spreadsheet of an approved budget, and then we go through somewhere in the middle of the year and we review that budget and we decide that, hey, IT is really not going to need all the money they had. Let's go ahead and push this over to research and development. If I go into the budget card itself over under financial cards, wherever my cards are here, and I go into the budget and change it, there's no history of that change. There's no rhyme or reason to that. If I go out to the source spreadsheet that my users sent me and I change that, again, I have no documented reason for that. So later, Matt over in IT is going to get really mad because all of a sudden now his budget, instead of showing 20,000 this year, is showing 15,000, and he doesn't know why. So if I go into this budget transaction entry window, I can actually come in here, pull up any existing budget I have, and then I can make entries. And I can do a couple of different things. First of all, I could do mass entry. So if we were going to increase or decrease our budget by a specific percentage across the board, I could do that by a specific amount, etc. So I could mass adjust this budget, and this is going to post transactions to a table that are available in GP and that show why I did this. So I've got some audit support there. I could also come in here and pull up just one account And once I do that, I can start making adjustments here, increase or decrease, and am I changing a net change or am I changing a period balance? One thing to keep in mind if you're making account-specific entries is that if this is I'm pulling $5,000 off the IT budget and putting it over to R&D, I need to do that in 2 counts. This is kind of in 2 transactions. This is kind of a one-sided entry. This is just saying I'm doing an increase or a decrease to this specific account. It's not a debit credit kind of thing, okay? So just so that you know, you've got that functionality to go ahead and make an auditable, trackable transaction to show why you changed that budget. Okay. Next on my list is navigation. Okay. So a lot of folks, and if you see me navigate, I'm running off of, I've clicked on financial here on my navigation, and then I have a home page just in case you don't use this frequently. If you come out and you see something along the lines like this, you can expand like I did up here with this little button, and that will highlight or bring to center whichever piece you're using. And you can toggle those. So if I'm doing, cards to do a new account entry, and then I'm going to run down here and do transactions, this is how I process, just because my ADD brain works a little better if I've got what I'm working on in focus. And I also have mine set up so that my other options show across the side, so I get more landscape over here to do my working with. But just to let you know, that's kind of how we travel. From a support standpoint, if you're asking me for help, I'm going to tell you to click financial on the navigation pane, and then I'm going to tell you to go to transactions and do et cetera, okay? But with this navigation pane and home, this is considered your financial home page. With this type of navigation, we added a whole lot of stuff down the side here, one of which are these list type items. I'm going to start down here with this general ledger batches. When they added this feature, I was like, well, that's stupid. And then they made it really cool, and I love this feature. The benefit of this feature is that I can see all of my unposted GL batches. Down here, I can pick a batch, and I can drill into that batch to see what it is. I can also pick 4 or 5 random batches and run an edit list on those batches. And what it's going to do is it's going to create 3 different edit lists for me. So there's the first one. There's the second one, and no warnings yet. If I had any errors or warnings, of course, I would be able to see those. These all came through beautifully with no errors or warnings. So if I want to at that point in time, I can just post those. So if you've been using GP for any length of time, the navigation you may be used to is up here on the main financial page. You would come into transactions, you would go into series post, you would mark everything and click series and click post. Or you would mark everything and then you would realize, hey, I really don't know what that transaction is. So you'd close out of this window, you'd go over to batches, you'd pull up that transaction, except that if you've been doing this for very long, you know that you can't pull up that transaction because it's going to tell you, hey, that transaction is marked for posting. So then we'd have to close out of this window, go back over to series posting, unmark that batch, and come back in. So instead of doing all that now, we just use this general ledger batches. We're able to get to all of our batches, drill into all of them, print edit lists, and post. Beautiful, beautiful feature. Okay. The next piece on the navigation list is simply this accounts option. And when this loads, I'm going to get a couple of errors, warning you up front, because I do not have my SQL Service reporting reports loaded. So SQL Service reports, also called SSRS reports, I don't have mine loaded, and it's trying to use some of those reports to build some KPIs right over here. If you try and use this functionality and you get a bunch of error messages like that, let us know, because there's a couple of things we can do. We can run a script behind the scenes to turn these all off, or we could deploy the SSRS reports for you. One of the big bonuses of the SSRS reports is with an SSRS trial balance, aged AP report, aged AR report, any of those reports that you can run, you are one click from exporting that to Excel. If you've ever run a trial balance in GP and tried to export the native trial balance to Excel, you know it's ugly and it's formatted poorly and it doesn't quite work. So the SSRS reports are they're easy to deploy. They take about 30 minutes to deploy, and then you set up the security to say who can get to which reports. And once they're deployed, they give you a whole lot of extra functionality, specifically the ability to export reports to Excel into a nice formatted version really quickly. Okay, so all that said, as I'm talking really rapidly, the beauty of this accounts option here is that you can build and save different queries. So it's a lot like SmartList. In this one I have saved over here, it's going to pull up all of the accounts where the segment 1 contains 100 and the account segment 2 contains 61. So I've pulled all of these specific accounts for a given division. You can set up as many of these remembered items as you wanted to. So if I wanted to have a chart of accounts that was for if I wanted to have a separate one for each division or each department or each something along those lines, I could do that and really quickly and easily save those. And slightly different than SmartList, I have different criteria, so I can do and or and not. So I could say where it's, account range is 6100 and account isn't 6170. So a little bit more like an FRX or an MR to be able to cherry pick. But the biggest benefit, I can save all of those, and then I also have the ability within here, go back to my first one, and let it build for just a second. The thing that I like the most is that I can pick completely random accounts, and just to prove that, we'll scroll way down here to the bottom where it's not applicable to anything we just did, and I can run a trial balance for just those 3 accounts. So if you know GP, from the GP trial balance, you would not be able to do this because you would have to insert a range of accounts that either had all of segment 400 or all of segment 100, or you could run it for this one specific account, or you could run it through for these 3 contiguous accounts, but you can't get 3 random accounts like this. So this window gives me the ability to completely and totally cherry pick what those 3 accounts are and get a trial balance for just those 3 accounts. Obviously, if this were something I ran frequently, like if this is Bob's accounts, Bob is responsible for 5 different accounts, and I want to report those 5 accounts, I could set up filters and say, and account number is this, and account is this, or account is this, or account is this, and save that. So when you get your criteria saved, let's just do this, you can actually save these criteria. So I would save this as accounts 100, and I don't think I actually ran the query. So I'm not sure that it's stuck that way since I didn't actually push the button to run the query. But you can save as many of these as you want. And once they're saved, and I didn't run the query, so that's why I didn't save. So we'll go back up here to this one. Once it's saved, you can actually choose who gets to see this. So there's a lot you can do when it gets saved. I can customize it, and I can come out here and tell who gets to see this and who doesn't get to see it, and what columns are included, so I could add additional columns, etc. So there's a lot of stuff I can do to it once I get it saved to really gutsy it up. I can also take this list and, of course, shoot it out to Excel. But another really handy deal is I could take these, 5 accounts, and I can inactivate them. So I can mass deactivate in this window. That's quite handy. Okay. We have about 5 minutes left, and I believe I have 2 topics left. Yes, so let's get on to those 2 topics. Now I've lost my mouse. Come on. Okay, so the last 2 topics I have are reporting and SmartList. For reporting, the thing that people miss the most in reporting is the ability to use what I call dynamic dates. So within the reporting system, you'll see I've got a trial balance set up, and I've got one called CM, and I've got one called PM. That stands for current month, and that stands for prior month. So if I open this up, you can see that I've got beginning of period to end of period. That's going to use this system date right down here. And when I run this report, this is going to run for April. I've got the same report set up, same criteria set up, and I've got it set up for previous period. So the benefit of this is that you don't have to change these reports to run them. So I see a lot of people who come in here, they click demo, they click modify, they go into this system, into this window, and they change whatever they need. They print the report, they close out, and they say don't save. And every time they run that report. The way I have this set up, I can come in here, I can insert, and by the way, you can insert more than one. I can click print, and I will have at the click of 2 clicks, the current month trial balance, and the prior month trial balance. And that will change with me dynamically. So next month when I come in and run this, I'm going to get April and May, et cetera, et cetera. Okay. The other benefit that you have is that with these buttons, when you're setting these reports up, you have a My Reports option. And when you click My Reports, it lets you save them to your desktop. So I've already saved mine. So we're going to go out and look at them. So I'm going to travel back over here to my home. And in my reports section, you can see detailed trial balance PM and detailed trial balance CM. Again, because I don't have to go change dates in those, I literally can do one click and get the current month trial balance. If my computer will catch up with me. Let me see if I have other report open. Nope. Well, let me see if I clicked it. No, helps if you actually click it. One click. There we go. One click, current month trial balance. So utilizing those dates within your reporting really does save you a ton of time. Instead of going in every time and changing those report parameters, save those report parameters to do what you want them to do. Okay, really quickly, I'm going to hit Smart List. Two things really quickly in Smart List, and then we'll open it up for some questions. Within Smart List, first of all, you now have the ability to, where's my date transaction? Come on. I think I need a new battery in my mouse. You have the same things that we had in reporting. So you've got beginning of period, end of period, beginning of quarter, end of quarter, and I think we had a beginning of previous to end of previous that they added. There we go. Prior month, next month, prior period, next period. So we just added these recently. But once again, if I can save my parameters in my Smart List, favorite, so that it's pulling prior month or current month, then I don't have to come in and enter a date every time. It saves me a ton of effort. Okay, the last thing in Smart List that I want to show you is the ability to kind of change things up. So if I go in and do debit equals 50 and credit equals 50, of course, I'm not going to get any data because there's nowhere inside of GP that has a debit and a credit equal to 50 because each line is recorded separately and you can't have a debit and a credit on the same line. However, if I toggle one little switch in here, this little guy down here, match one or more turns this to an or statement. So before it said this and this and this and this, now it says this or this or this or this. So when I say okay, I actually find all of my transactions where the debit or the credit is $50, which really helps me do some searching if I'm looking for a specific dollar amount. This is true across all of the pieces, all of the functionality within Smart List is that you can change that to an or. So if I'm looking to see if a vendor already exists, I can say vendor ID contains ADVINT, or vendor name contains Njevity, or address contains Colorado, something along those lines. If I know one nugget, I can make those an or statement and make them much more functional. Okay, with that, we are going to open it up to questions and answers. You guys can either type your questions in the box over to the side, or you can raise your hand and Brandon can take you off mute and you can ask your questions. Or I have spoken so fast that I've completely overwhelmed you with information and you're just trying to absorb it all. Okay, well, seeing no questions, we are right at our 30-minute mark, which was what we had budgeted for this webinar. If you do decide after the fact that you have any questions, feel free to email wepperson@njevity.com or support@njevity.com, and we'll be happy to answer those for you. And thank you very much for joining us. Have a great weekend.